A very warm welcome from my side to Greenlight for Digital, what's in the new German government coalition agreement on digital. This is a topic we are going to discuss tonight in the next 60 minutes, and I'm very happy to be joined tonight by Malte Spitz, who you're seeing close to me. He is the lead negotiator in the government negotiations. He's member of the Green Party Council, but professionally, he is not a politician, but he's now the Secretary General of the Society for Civil Rights, Berlin-based NGO, nonprofit founded in 2015 that Malte founded as well. And its mission is to establish a sustainable structure for successful strategic litigation in the area of human and civil rights in Germany and in Europe. And the current cases are focusing on protecting privacy, freedom of information and the press, and defending equal freedom for all. So I think that's already a very remarkable fact that the lead negotiator is a great digital rights and civil rights activist for the Green Party in this case. So first of all, all the Germans on the call will know that, but maybe there's someone who has not looked into this so closely. The new coalition is between the Social Democrats, the Liberals, and the Greens. And this is a great change because it's the first time after 16 years that we have a government, or we're going to have a government, hopefully soon, without participation of Christian Democrats. We come from a Chancellor, Angela Merkel, who has certainly their merits, quite recognized by the Greens as well, but who in 2013 still said, oh, the internet, that is uncharted territory. This is the situation we lived in. And one of the running gags the running jokes that the Germans make who live in other countries, who travel a lot in Europe, well, you know, you're back in Germany when you cross the border and your cell phone stops working. So this is the way Germany is lagging behind. I think there's an acute need of a huge modernization in digital terms in Germany that is very strongly felt by the population as well. And therefore, I'm very happy that the whole motto of this coalition is a new start or a fresh start, Aufbruch. And for us, obviously, it's a digital fresh start. The only limitation to the digital part in the coalition agreement is the fact that we only had 10,000 characters to spell that out. And that was pretty difficult, as Malte can testify. So without further ado, I'm going to give him the floor. The way we organize this, the next 60 minutes, is we will show you a short presentation, outline a little bit the main content, the main points of the digital part of the coalition agreement, around 10 to 15 minutes, and then you will have time to ask questions, to inquire in all the details that are not there. So we will have a very interactive discussion, I hope. And obviously, we also want to focus a little bit on what that means, not only for Germany, but for Europe, for the European Union, where we know that very important legislative dossiers are at stake right now, the DSA, DMA, that I'm negotiating, the Artificial Intelligence Act and the Data Act that's coming up. And speaking about the DSA, I forgot to introduce myself. That's a bad mistake. I'm very sorry. My name never happens. First time. My name is Alexandra Geese. I'm a member of the European Parliament for the German Green Party. I was part of the negotiating team for the coalition agreement, which was composed of Malte Spitz, who I already introduced. I didn't forget that, at least. Anna Christmann, who is an artificial intelligence expert and a member of the German Bundestag, and JPA, who many of you might know, Jan-Philipp Albrecht, who was lead negotiator, a rapporteur for the GDPR. So that's me. I'm also the shadow rapporteur on the DSA, the Digital Services Act, that we're currently finalizing in Parliament, and that hopefully is going to trilogue next year and might change the digital landscape and also the democratic landscape of Europe, hopefully. So, okay, without further ado, the floor to you, Malte, and I will share my screen in order to show the presentation.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Also, very warm welcome from my side. I will talk a bit about the issues of the coalition agreement. And I think one really important issue is that we said that it's not only any longer time for just like talking about the issues, but that we really have to improve the improve the situation in Germany by implementing the politics in this field. So therefore, it's really about measurable goals. For example, we also introduced a new so-called digital budget, which means that there is some extra that there is some extra money for digital projects, especially between different ministries, so that we have a more agile working culture, for example. A special issue is that we said that we have to digitize the whole administration, for example, and that we really focus the implementation on the needs of the citizens. Next slide. Alexandra, can you go one further? Yeah, and there are some issues, especially when it comes to the digital state, so like the whole digitization in the state government, especially issues like for the Germans, like the OZG, which means accessibility and digitization to online services, for example, which is like a huge process here in Germany. And this is something which we want to move on with. And especially for us as Greens, I think the issues of open source software in the government, and also like real tight issues of open standards as like the general rule for all IT in the government is something where we really step one step forward, for example. Next slide. Digital digital infrastructure already was mentioned, is still a situation where Germany is, not really improved yet, and we have now the agreement that we focus all our money on fiber optical technology. In the past, there was also so-called cable internet, which isn't really suitable for the future. I think from a green perspective, the whole issue of IT security is really turn around here. We have like all issues in like security by design, that there is a right to encryption. We have something on the issue of so-called chat control, and also issues like right to interoperability and portability. All issues where you would normally say, yeah, sure, it has to be, but it's still something which lacked here, because the conservatives always were like more into hacking the IoT devices than in securing the IoT security, for example. Next slide. On the issue of and there's also like some example for hackbacks, which is also said that there are no hackbacks any longer. There is still something in the German law which could be interpreted as that hackbacks are okay. When it comes to the data point on data governance, I think it's the next slide. We will create a so-called data institute. It's something I would say for the UK folks, which is like the open data institute there, which is something about the general issues around sharing of data and so on. There is still no institution yet in Germany which is handling all these questions, also on a, I would say, a technical side, but also with legal and political implementations into that. And there's also something new, which is said that state-owned companies, for example, have the right to access private data, for example, if they need it for, like, for example, social issues, for example. So this is also a new step forward. GDPR for sure is still something which we are happy about, and I think also something really cool is that we want to criminalize illegal de-anonymity anonymization, which isn't forbidden yet here. And I think the next slide is also the turnover to Alexandra when it comes to civil society, where we are saying that we want to support especially civil society on issues like civic tech, so something like the Open Technology Fund, for example, and also that we want to support them financially when it comes to issues of diversity in the digital civil society. And now I will hand over to Alexandra.
Thanks a lot, Malte, for the first part and for handing me the floor. I'm particularly proud of this fund for civil society and the support for civil society in areas such as diversity and civic tech, because before, in my capacity as a member of the European Parliament, I was sitting in the Artificial Intelligence Committee. And we had Timnit Gebru, former Google co-lead on AI and ethics, and the one who really, together with Joy Bola-Mambini, showed how biased AI, especially facial recognition technology, was against Black women. And she was in our meeting digitally. And she said, well, yeah, regulation is important, but what is really important is that public institutions and governments support civil society in proactively developing good software for those groups and for the whole of the population, and not leaving technology development and also the funding of technology only to large corporations. So I was very proud to be able to say, oh, we just implemented that in the new German government. Then there's another point I'm very proud of, and that was one thing that for me, and especially for Anna Christmann, my co-negotiator, was an extremely important point. It's increasing the number of female founders, of women in the digital sector, because I've been working quite a lot on this, as well as Anna, and we know that we lack women in the digital sector, especially among startups, and the funding mechanisms, the way venture capital works, really makes it very, very difficult for women to create their own companies in the digital realm. So we will have a share of the public German venture capital fund called Zukunftsfonds, which will be earmarked for female founders, and we will have specific grants also for female founders, and I hope this will really, really, really help. And then we have a provision on support for victims of digital violence. There will be probably some legislative changes. I think we need to update procedure law, especially that makes it very difficult for victims of digital violence, which are often but not always women, to really enforce their rights. And we would like to support, and we will support, centers in every German state that provide counsel, but also legal aid, legal support to victims, that help to trace down perpetrators. We have one in Germany that's really doing a great job, and I think we really need structures like this in the whole country in order to effectively counteract digital violence. Now this is not working. Okay, artificial intelligence, and here we come more to the European area. We express strong support for the European AI Act as an idea. We obviously have to look what's into it from a more party policy point of view, but as a coalition, we support the idea definitely of having a European AI Act. And we have a particular strong focus on AI that respects fundamental rights, and in particular freedom from discrimination. Then this is a very strong point. The next point is the ban for biometric recognition in public spaces. And if you are working on policy in Brussels, you know this is a really, really big topic. There's this huge campaign by civil society organizations going on. It's in the AI Act, but with quite a lot of limitations. So we don't know whether it's going to be effective. So having the support of the German government for ban for biometric recognition in public spaces, I think this is really a game changer. I'm very, very proud we achieved this together. We also have the ban for automatic scoring systems, public scoring systems using AI. That's in the AI Act, and we totally support that. And another thing that especially I would like to comment Anna Christmann's work here, and I strongly supported that as well, is the support for European AI research networks, for example, Alice and Claire. So here Germany is making a very clear commitment to the fact that artificial intelligence research needs to be European, and we really stand behind this and want to spend money on these networks because we believe they can really make European artificial intelligence progress in an important way. So, oops. Not sure which direction I'm going. I'm sorry. Sustainability. Okay. That was not perfectly in my order, but let's just take it since we are the Greens. Sustainability is obviously extremely important to us. And I'm quite proud that we did not only say that data centers need to be ecologically sustainable and follow climate protection requirements, but we very clearly said that new data centers shall be climate neutral as of 2027. Obviously, the Greens wanted to be there to be before, but 2027, I think, is a great compromise. And in particular, public data centers need to use in an EMAS management scheme by 2025. Other important achievement, and that's been discussed quite a lot in Brussels as well, is the right to repair. So replacement parts and software update for devices have to be available for the usual time that object is being used, or that software program, and this is to be made transparent to the consumer. So when you buy a device, you know for how long it's going to be serviced. Oh, then my favorite topic, the Digital Services Act. So we specifically mentioned the Digital Services Act. We said very clearly we want to protect communication freedoms. We stand for a strong user rights, for a strong notice and action. Article 4, and this is very important because this is not uncontroversial, the access to the data of very large online platforms, the so-called VLOPs, for research purposes. That was something that was wanted by other coalition partners to have some kind of limitation, but I think it's perfectly fine because of the DSA, that access to data is foreseen in order to make sure that the regulation is correctly enforced, and therefore we need research. Another important point is the auditability of the algorithmic systems of very large online platforms, and we obviously want clear rules against disinformation. And then there are some general principles that are partly but not all connected to the Digital Services Act. A clear no to a general monitoring obligation. And then this is very important, there's no scanning. We want a ban for the scanning of private communication, and who is around in Brussels for what is called chat control knows that this is a topic on the agenda with the e-privacy derogation. So the German government saying, no, we don't want to scan private communication. We don't want companies to scan private communication is a very important point here. And no identification obligation. Then, foreign affairs, security, defense, development, human rights, so many things. We had a small chapter on this because the external dimension, I think, of digital policy has been for a long time totally underestimated, especially by our government, but also generally. So we very clearly say we support the global civil society for digital civil rights. I think we see again, this is a very green thing, the strong commitment to the support of civil society. Then very important point, a very practical point, we say we stop the export of surveillance technology to repressive regimes. Everybody probably remembers the Pegasus affair in the past month, so having this really strong commitment by a German government, I think this is something I'm very proud of. In terms of development cooperation, we want to help countries to build independent digital infrastructure to strengthen also their digital sovereignty, including at EU level. And those of you who read Playbook every morning, as most people in the Brussels bubbles do, will have noticed the Global Gateway project that was very prominently published today. And this is basically what we're referring to, this kind of thing, a strong cooperation. And the Global Gateway project, for example, it's Africa. Obviously, that one has different strands, but I think the digital strand is very important. As we always say in Brussels, well, we want to be the standard setters, but we also need to have the technology, and we need to share that technology with other countries in order to count in the world. If it's only us against China, or with different, maybe somehow different values from the US, we will have a difficult stance. But if we can make sure to cooperate well with the rest of the world in terms of standards, but also in terms of technology, I think we have a real good chance also to live our values, to communicate our values. And there's a point on the international law for the internet, for example, making sure that civilian infrastructure cannot be attacked in cyber attacks, and a few other points. I think that's quite interesting also. Okay, that was it. That was just a quick one. And now we have time for your questions. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay, here we are. Now you have two possibilities. There's a Q&A tool, which some of you are already using, and I check right away. But you also, since, well, we are not thousands of people, it's still, we have the possibility to have you speak. So if you want to come in and speak and ask your question directly to Malte Spitz or to me, you can just raise your hand and we have the possibility to give you the floor. But we will start with the written questions. In the meantime, raise your hands if you want to, or keep putting questions into the QA tool. Just one thing, we are recording, so if you don't want your voice in the recording, it's better if you put the question into the QA tool, because we're recording this. So the questions, I'm just seeing applause and many thanks. Yes, thank you so much. Wouldn't it make more sense to support a mix of female and founders generally out of future fund? VCs are more and more inclined to support mixed teams. It's perfectly fine to, I think I can take that. Is that okay with you, Malte? It's perfectly fine to support mixed teams, and there's absolutely nothing to exclude it. Just the fact is that female-only teams have a really, really hard time to get funding. You know, I'm not sure about the numbers for the German Zukunftsfonds, but I checked the one of Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau, which is public bank, public institution in Germany, and I think the share of female founders getting money out of that public fund is like around 6%. I mean, the numbers are totally shocking. So I think we have a lot of space there to fund women and mixed teams, and obviously mixed teams are more than welcome. Do I see right that the coalition agreement has no opinion on surveillance advertising? The next German government will have to have an opinion on the DSA. Any idea what that will be? That's a tricky one. The people who know me know that I was maybe the main Brussels advocate for a ban on surveillance advertising. And I think our work and the work of the Greens in the European Parliament really put that topic on the table. So now everybody is speaking about it. I have to say, going into government with German liberals, and that's not Renew for, you know, just the Brussels bubble. That's sort of the right, extreme right wing of Renew, to stay in Brussels language. There are very different kinds of liberals, and our liberals are very pro-business, and asking for a ban on surveillance advertising in the coalition agreement was hard. The German government will have an opinion on the DSA. Currently, unfortunately, there is no ban on surveillance advertising in the DSA. What we do have is some language on dark patterns, and we probably will have a ban for minors. That's a chance we stand. And the Parliament's report, there will probably be a ban on minors. This is still, you know, sort of under embargo because we're going to vote in December. We're not there yet. And I think the German government will support this best solution we will have on the table between the councils and the Parliament, the council's general approach and the Parliament's report. That's what I can say. Then I'm seeing a question on, well, so many questions now.
I can answer maybe the next two ones on Xendis, which is like the idea to support the development of open source technology, especially also basic technology. Xendis is still in the process to be built up. So there is not yet any real entity. There is just the agreement of the past government that it has to be built up. Xendis isn't really mentioned in the agreement, but there is also not mentioned that it isn't good. So I think there is a clear positive stand on that, especially also all the issues of open source software, of open standards and so on. I think it's a clear saying that there has to be something like Census or Census, and that this will be also a special focus of the next government, especially the open source cloud, for example. So I'm positive on that. And the next one is around the issue of not trustworthy companies. There is a definition for critical infrastructure and the guidelines of the BSI, so the German Central for IT Security, and there they have a definition what it means to be not really a trustworthy company. We will see if this kind of definition is enough, or if there has to be something more specific, for example. The next questions, I have to move up.
Maybe the one by Monica Emert on the review of a number of legislation that work rather as a bad precedent for internet legislation. It's a NetzDG question basically, and the check on surveillance, or the Überwachungsgesamtrechnung, I suppose.
Yeah. The Netzwerkdurchsetzungsgesetz, there is a sentence in the coalition agreement. I have to find it exactly where it says like old laws in that field will be merged to new laws, something like that, where I have the sentence that was a longer discussion. It's in the digital society field. There it says on the basis of the upcoming European legislation, we will transform or rewrite the laws like TMG and also NetzDG. I think if we have the law on digitale Gewaltschutz and then also the DSA, maybe there is no longer the necessity to also have a completely independent Durchsetzungsgesetz. But I think this is something which has to be discussed when the DSA is finished and the new law against digital violence is also implemented.
Great. Would you like to take the ICANN question? Is there an opinion on move of e.g. ICANN to state control in the coalition agreement? I can say there is not, but maybe you want to.
No, there is nothing special on that. I think it hasn't also been discussed largely in the foreign policy chapter as well. So no, there is no specific sentence on that issue. But there is something in general that we are supporting multi-stakeholder processes on the international level. So it is something I can, yes, but not really specific, at least.
Yeah, I'm just looking for new questions. I mean, there was the other question on targeted advertising, but I think I already commented on that. That's the second question. And on the e-privacy regulation that is currently in trilogue, I mean, as the question mentioned, it is currently in trilogue, which means that the possibility to influence the outcome for a single government that is not even in office yet is very limited. I mean, if I can push the German government, if the trilogue keeps dragging on as it's doing now, and we will have a government in place that will have a say within council, that will be obviously go in the right direction, but I think there the positions are already fixed because I mean, council votes a general approach, and that's what's on the table and needs to be negotiated by the presidency, which will be French in the next 6 months, starting from January. So I think the influence of an incoming German government, to be realistic, is very limited. That doesn't mean we won't go earlier or later towards a phase out of surveillance advertisement. I mean, the Commission has been quite alerted on the risks. There's so many things going on different levels. There are European lawsuits by the Irish Council of Civil Liberties, by Max Schrems. The Commission is really, really looking into this. I think we already had a success with this campaign, really putting the topic on the table, having everybody into it, showing also that the competition issues linked to it, not only the privacy issues, but also the competition issues are absolutely huge. The EDPS came out with an opinion saying, well, we should have a ban targeted advertisement. There's a lot going on. I think we will not finalize a ban, neither in the DSA nor in the DSA nor in the privacy derogation, but I think we will have some rules that will help us to show also the industry that this is step by step being outfaced by the market. That's my hope, at least, but we have to keep fighting for it.
I will maybe answer to the climate neutral data centers. This means, yes, they have to be climate neutral. The optimistic scenario is that they also have organized green energy. If they cannot run it completely on green energy, then at least they have to buy they have to buy CO2 certificates for that, and it's also about like having new systems implemented to use energy from the data centers, for example, Abwärme. What's the English word for Abwärme? So heat out of the computers to use it for heating systems and so on. So this is something, yes, it isn't easy, but I think also having now 6 years, and this is especially for really only a newly opened data center. So you have now 5 to 6 years to implement it, and I think that is workable or doable. And then there was the question from Monica on the issue of data retention. It wasn't negotiated in our group, so I also can only guess how it meant, but I would also read it as a system of quick freeze only, so that it hasn't been, so that there has to be concrete issues if you want to collect telecommunication metadata, and that there is no longer and that this is no longer a general rule to do it.
Yeah. And I think we can add to that that Germany is not Poland. So when we have a ruling by the ECJ, we will obviously abide by it, and that's going to be a step forward as well. Would you like to take Petra's question? Because I think that's really interesting. She said this is such a big leap forward, and considering how things have been done, the dependency on Microsoft, closed source tools, and so on, how are we, oh no, the question jumped away.
Yeah.
How are we expecting to implement that, or put it differently, to which percentage do you expect things to be fulfilled after the 4 years? Hard question, but we worked a lot on this, and this is really one of your big topics. And
I have to find it, actually. I'm sorry. Here now. Yeah. I think this is really where also money is really important. For example, there is the idea, or there is already the development of a so-called open source Arbeitsplatz, so like the open source working place, that you have like the whole setup of open source software to really run a workplace in the government. So having open source email client, open source OS, and so on. And this is something where you have to invest money, and it's not only about, I don't know, 10 million. It's more like about 100 million that you have to invest for something like that. And I think having a real focus on that is, I think, one way to get out of the old system and be more independent and have alternatives implemented in the government on all levels. But for sure, this will take time. So we are really talking about 2 year, 3 year, or even longer time periods, especially for the open source cloud, for example.
Yeah, there's a question on cybersecurity. No.
Cybersecurity isn't mentioned once in the slides. Yeah, we normally say IT security. I think it's something German that we more calling it IT security, and I think it was in the slides on them, and it really is an issue which we have in really lots of different fields in the coalition agreement. And as I said, I think this is one of the fields where we really have a turnaround shift, like really investing and also making hard laws to support strong IT security. I think, or I hope at least, that this government will really make their really big difference, and even maybe become here a kind of role model for other nations too. So other questions?
Yeah, I'm looking for the next question. Just one thing, if you just have a comment, can you put that in the chat, and there's the questions in the Q&A tool, and you can still also ask for the floor and raise your hands. Because if we have all the comments on the question and answer to, it gets difficult to figure out what the real questions are.
Maybe I will answer again on this question about Cendes. I think this so-called support infrastructure, that you get educated on open source technology and all that, I think this will be a part of Cendes. So it won't be only the development of IT, and so, but it will be also about educating, helping, and coaching in that field. So I think, or I'm optimistic on that.
Great. Would you like to take the question on the right to, will the right to encryption be put into law, and how, and what happens to the CITES established by ministerial decree so far?
Yeah, that is something, right? We said that there is a right to encryption. We also say that at least the state has to implement and open up their own communication system for really end-to-end encrypted communication. And the role of CITES, I would say there is a double role. One side is that we are saying that we need a stronger legal framework for it, and on the other hand, we are also saying that this whole field of institutes in that context have to be renewed and revised. So I also hope that we will have some changes to CITES, for example, for all the non-Germans. CITES is like the state supporting hacking institute. So it's not only about making encryption, it's like about weakening encryption technology, and also support state hacking.
Thank you. I'm looking for further questions. I think we answered quite a lot of them, quite effective. Did you answer the one on the climate neutrality and data sets, and thus including the production of the hardware and construction of the building?
Not yet. I think production of the hardware, I don't think so. I think it's really more on the operating side of the data centers, but we also have at least for the state-owned data centers also in that we also look on the hardware part, but for private companies we don't have there a specific regulation in that.
Okay, then we have this very broad question that would take us the rest of the night to answer. This coalition agreement is one of the few cases in my life where I have seen digital rights improve. Well, GDPR was such a case as well. I think you were alive at the time. Are there any other signs of things improving in the EU and EU member states, or is this an outlier for now? Maybe a promise for the future? Does anyone have such an overview? That's an interesting question. I would say it is a promise for the future, and having a German government being committed to those values bodes well for a European future. That would be my quick answer. And obviously having the DSA and the DMA kicking in, which will not be perfect, but still a step forward. And also the AI Act, which is far from perfect, as I have commented on Twitter and everywhere where I'm asked to do so. But it still is a way forward and a step forward compared to not having anything in these areas. So maybe Victor is more referring to privacy protection and encryption and so on. Maybe you would like to come in on this as well, Malte, to this very general question. You might have an interesting overview from your other job as well.
No, I'm not. No, like also if I have an overview, it isn't an optimistic overview. And it was quite interesting that the Spiegel said on all this issues that this is like conservative or old style digital politics, because it goes back to the tradition of the 80s and 90s and so on, for an open internet, but also for a secure internet, for example. And I think the important step is that we can show that that, for example, changing ways how you have done it for the last years or for the last decade, for example, is doable. For example, when it comes to an issue, for example, data retention and quick freeze, for example, that if we can show it that it is working, then I think it also can have an impact on European states elsewhere. So I look if there are other questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's this general comment, which is interesting, by Petra. She said, what I'm missing are the links between vision and the political guidance, which is clearly there. And I think that's already a great achievement, and the change in the day-to-day business. This is less of a question than a comment, which we probably all share, but it's still very early to tell how this is going, how this will be going. But maybe you want to comment a little bit on how this is distributed in ministries and how we think this can be implemented in the German administration. You know, getting the political guidance to day-to-day business. I mean, that is an issue.
It is an issue, but for example, we have in a different chapter in the coalition agreement, it says that in every ministry there has to be digital competences on the top floor of this ministry. So I think on the one hand that we want to improve overall implementation, but that we also want to improve like when it comes to the leading figures, which is like state secretaries, for example, and so on, that there has to be an openness and even competences on digital issues. And our hope is if you have also kind of new generation in the political administration, that this will also have a larger impact. I would answer two questions on the sovereign digital identities. We have identity management in the text, but we haven't really explored it further because, as Alexandra said, we only had 10,000 characters for everything in our field. But there is at the moment, there is at the moment the process on the European level for digital identities. And as we discussed about it, there was a quite large openness for that. And there was a question of Monica about how many laws have to be touched. I don't know, but if we say like everything we want to change in that field, and we also include this whole state modernization thing, I would say at least a couple of dozens law at the end maybe, but we haven't counted them.
Yeah, I can maybe come back in briefly with the on the digital identities. There is a regulation, a EU regulation called the Trusted and Secure European EID regulation, but that is still, I mean, it's not finalized yet. It's on the table, so this is something you might want to look at as well. And then there's the question, I got that question already. Is there anything about crypto mining and climate neutrality? Not in our chapter, definitely. 10,000 characters are not that many, actually. Anywhere else? I don't think so, Malte. Do you? It's 170, 80 pages. I've read them, but I might have missed something. So no, we actually don't have that. But I'm pretty sure we will keep it in mind as Greens. And I'm happy to announce, maybe as an additional comment, that today it was made public that Sven Giegold, who up until today was the head of the German delegation, the German Green delegation, which is basically the group of German Green members of the European Parliament here in Brussels in the European Parliament, and who's very, very well known by Vote Watch, for example, considered the third most influential politician, member of the European Parliament here in Brussels, although he's not part of one of the leading political groups, Sven Giegold, and he is to be the new state secretary at the Ministry for Economic Affairs under Robert Habeck. He's a great expert of European policy. He's interested, he's not an expert on digital matters, but he's quite interested, especially in the competition and privacy aspects that go with digital technologies. And I think he will really look at that, look into these issues. He's an expert. He knows quite a lot about crypto mining and cryptocurrencies. And in the Ministry of Economic Affairs is competent for the Digital Services Act as well here in the European Council. I hope this is not going to change, because I understand there's still some changes going on in the ministry. I'm very strongly advocating for leaving the DSA where it is in terms of competence. So what I can tell the Brussels people is that we will have a very, very competent person in the Ministry for Economic Affairs who knows Brussels very, very well, and who will be very open to tackle these questions as well. So is there still something we need to answer? Otherwise, I can make good on my promise to let you have dinner at 8 o'clock. It's 9:59.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Perfect.
Everyone.
Thanks a lot, Malte. Thanks to everybody.
Thanks a lot,
if you're
Alexandra.
interested in digital policy, follow us on social media. I have a newsletter as well. We will be communicating quite a lot on what's going on in the German government, and especially in Brussels in terms of digital policy. Have a wonderful evening. And
have a good evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.